Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the City of Grand Prairie's Franchise U. I don't see myself on the screen, but I hope you all can see me. I want to welcome you all for joining us. I am so excited that we have some franchisees and franchisors to join us today to talk us through and talk to us about the experience of franchising. I wanted to do some brief introductions. Their accomplishments are lengthy, so I've had to write them down. So I want to introduce first with FranNet, Ms. Sarah Waskow. Did I say that right, Sarah?
It's Wasco, but I answer to just about anything.
Okay. Great. So FranNet, for all of you in attendance, is basically a franchisee matchmaker. So they will provide an application, they will see you through the process, and find what is really a true match for you in regards to franchising. Corey Masters is a franchisee. He is a 5-year franchisee with Smoothie King. He has a location in DeSoto, Grand Prairie, and soon to be Rockwall. He is also an upcoming franchisee for La Madeleine's and Buttermilk Sky Pie. And when the Rockwall location opens for Smoothie King and Buttermilk Sky Pie will be co-tenants. So congratulations on that, Corey. Next up, we have Ms. Lucretia Thomas. Ms. Thomas is a franchisee with Sweet and Sassy. And for those of you who are not familiar with the brand, Sweet and Sassy is a spa, salon, and party destination for kids. They have the cute pink limousine. If you've seen that around, that is what Sweet and Sassy is. And Lucretia, let me go back. Corey, I want to make sure I mention this. Corey actually grew up in Grand Prairie. I have to make sure I note that. So he brought back his business to Grand Prairie, and Lucretia has worked in Grand Prairie for the last 7 years. So she has been looking for a space in Grand Prairie, and we are so excited to hopefully land Sweet and Sassy in Grand Prairie. Next up, we have Scott McIntosh. He is the VP of Franchise Development for Mr. Gaddy's. Yes, you heard that right, Mr. Gaddy's. They are still around. I was telling Scott back in the day when I was in middle school, we would take our report cards to Mr. Gaddy's. We got an A and have the time of our lives. So excited to have Scott here to talk to us about the franchisor side of franchising. And then last, we have Ken Lineberger. He's the president of Water's Edge Wineries. And Ken has several brands of wineries throughout the state of Texas, and he's going to be here to discuss that as well. I'm hoping, full transparency for Ken and Scott, that we are able to land both a Water's Edge Winery and Mr. Gaddy's in Grand Prairie, and that the franchisee will be from Grand Prairie. Joining us later is Roderick Floyd. He is a franchisee as well, providing a different perspective with being a franchisee from CMIT, so an IT franchisee, providing a different perspective of franchising to say that it's not all about restaurants. So with no further delay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our Q&A. The chat has been enabled, so if you all have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And I will ask those questions of our panelists here, and you could also put them in the Q&A tab. So I'm going to start with you, Sarah. I know when we first kicked off Franchise U, we talked about the process and identifying if franchising is for you. Can you reiterate some of those things to look for in a franchise and what FranNet does for those that are interested in franchising?
Sure, great question. So, a lot of people will ask, should they buy a franchise or should they start from scratch? And if someone has the creativity and the desire to make all the decisions on their own and build their own systems and build a business from their passion, starting something from scratch might be a better fit. But there's a lot of people that want to own a business. They like the idea of those processes and systems already being in place and kind of basically being able to follow a recipe and skip some of the trial and error. So a lot of what could be the case is that investing in a franchise could actually be a lower investment if you're avoiding some costly mistakes. So we really try to help people discern how they feel about following processes and systems. If they are doing their due diligence and they are not in agreement with the processes and systems provided by that franchisor, we always advise, don't buy that franchise with the expectation that you're going to go in and make changes. You need to make the commitment that you're going to follow the processes and systems that the franchisor has put in place and has proven. That's why you're buying the franchise. So what we really do at FranNet is get people thinking about some of those things and really evaluating what they want to accomplish from the business. Not buying a business because they happen to love a product or a service, but really be thinking about what their skill set is. How can they transfer that into the business? What kind of lifestyle are they wanting to create? What type of hours are they willing to put in? Do they want, what kind of employees do they want? How many employees do they want? And then making that match accordingly. So I hope that answered your question or questions.
It did.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Corey, you are a franchisee of several different brands. Congratulations again on that. I think that's absolutely amazing. What took you down the path in entrepreneurship for franchising over starting your own business?
Yeah, it's kind of piggybacking on what Sarah said. A lot of it had to do with the franchise. Most franchising concepts obviously have kind of a given playbook already prepared for you to have in play. And if they've hopefully worked out a lot of the kinks in their processes, so you're just running the plays essentially because the coaches already designed them for you. Prior to franchising, believe it or not, I did spend a little time with my own concept in a mattress store. So a mattress store is basically as simple as it can get, right? You buy the mattress at one price, sell it at another price. And it was not a franchise. So we were responsible for, creating our own marketing, our own processes, finding our own POS systems, working with our own vendors, doing all the legwork ourselves to kind of get everything up and running. So while not extremely difficult to do that, everything was on us to make sure all those processes were in place and we got good rates and everything worked and everything was cohesive. With the franchise process, they've already got all those vendors and everything already assigned for you, ready to go. So for example, when I built out my Smoothie King, as soon as my architect plans were done, all the vendors that Smoothie King works with contacted me, sent me emails, and let me know, here's what you got to buy, here's where you can buy it, here's your invoice. They certainly wanted their money, but it's a kind of a seamless process because they already had relationships with all these guys for years. And I'm just kind of coming right in, fitting into the big cog of what Smoothie King already has to offer.
And I think that's a great point in regards to if you want to have something that's already in place, franchising will be a great option for you. You can pick up and go, and then the support is there as well. Scott, with you being the VP of Franchise Development, what are some things that you all look for in a franchise, and what type of support do you provide? Just piggybacking off what Corey said, what do you provide to your franchisees to ensure their success?
Absolutely. Well, we specifically are looking for people that have a passion for our brand, first and foremost, but also a passion for developing people and taking care of guests. I like to say that we're in the people business first, and a byproduct of that is making pizza, and a byproduct of that is making money. And from a support standpoint, Corey hit the nail on the head. When you buy or invest into a franchise, there should be the playbook established. And instead of you spending all of your time trying to go find an architect, trying to, how do I manage a contractor? Where do I buy all this FF&E? Where do I buy these ingredients? Am I getting a good price on these ingredients? Just the leverage buying of a brand or a system can save you a ton, and not only in dollars, but also in bandwidth, the time that you spend chasing that stuff. When we want you spending your time working on your staff, working on your guests, working on your business of how you increase sales and how do you increase revenue, rather than, where do I go buy flour to make pizza?
Great, thank you for that, Scott. Ken, with Water's Edge Wineries, when people hear the word franchise, their mind defaults to, restaurant products or services. So with a Water's Edge Wineries, explain to us what the structure is, how that functions, the role of the franchisee would be in Water's Edge Wineries.
Sure. Thanks, Kay. So the structure essentially is we set up suburban and urban wineries. We basically bring the winery to the people. That's our vision. That's our goal. We've got 15 operating across the United States with 3 more under development. So we are an emerging brand. We've hit the Inc. 5,000 3 years in a row now for our system growth as we continue to grow the sales in our current locations. And our owners are pretty enthusiastic. So essentially, we don't grow grapes or harvest grapes. That's the secret of kind of how we're able to put these into populated areas. But we actually produce the wine at each location. So as you mentioned, Kay, we have several in Texas already. Texas is a huge market for us. We would love to be in the larger Dallas, Grand Prairie area. That's a key place for us to attract some business and be able to set up a franchise there. So it's basically we follow the idea that there's many white collar executives, senior managers of companies that have worked for corporations for a long time, and they want to pursue their own dream. And often that dream involves wine. And so when those match up, we're a pretty good pairing for both of them to come in and own a Water's Edge winery.
I would love to own a winery. I would myself.
A lot of people.
So Miss Thomas, Sweet and Sassy Spa and Salon, how did you choose that Sweet and Sassy would be the match for you?
Excellent question, Kay. I've known that I've wanted to open one for over a decade. So I have 2 daughters, 16 and 14. And when they were younger, we used to frequently go to a Sweet and Sassy. Only problem is it was an hour away. So I was like, wow, it would be great to have a party here one day. But I was thinking, no one wants to drive an hour to bring their daughters to a party. So I vowed from that day, taking my girls out to get all dolled up, that one day I wanted to own a Sweet and Sassy. So fast forward 10 years later, and here I am, opening a Sweet and Sassy closer to where I live in Grand Prairie. Well, I don't live in Grand Prairie, but closer to this side of town or in the Metroplex, where it's easily accessible to other young girls. So the closest one is South Lake. I'm not sure if either of you are familiar with the area, but it's pretty far. That was the impetus for me.
Far. What was your first step? Ms. Tom, what was your first step in franchising with Sweet and Sassy?
My first step was actually reaching out to the owners and expressing interest. And so we had a match meeting to see exactly, discussing why did I want the Sweet and Sassy and what were my goals and my life dreams. And I was like, you know what? I've been a busy retail manager for almost 20 years, and this is my dream. I want to bring smiles to the faces of young girls and boys. And so we matched, and after that, we had meetings of the different processes and what to expect along the way. So I love Sweet and Sassy because it's very guided, as everyone mentioned. The blueprint is there, and you should just follow it.
I think I'm going to ask this question of most of you, because from a franchisee and franchisor perspective, you can answer this question. So I know that most franchises are different. The franchises are different. Some require the owner to work at the location, run the business. Some do not require, so it looks different for everyone. So I'll start with you, Corey. With let's do Smoothie King. How much hands-on day-to-day operations is required of you once your business opens?
Well, to be clear, Smoothie King, you're right, doesn't require necessarily the owner to be in a store. I don't know if you ever read into the FDD or the website, about 70% of owners at Smoothie King own more than one location. So clearly most of us are going to be spread thin because most are multi-unit owners to begin with. Unlike like a Chick-fil-A, I think Chick-fil-A does require the owner to be also / the manager in the store, from what I understand. With me, I do have managers in place in both locations, but just the nature of my schedule and probably the fact that I want them to be successful and I want to support them in every way. If I'm not in each store every day, I rotate each location every other day. So I'm always in the stores, whether whether it's 5 days a week in one store or 7 days a week, depending on what's going on, if somebody's out, we're short-staffed or whatever, I'm pretty much at either both or one location every single day, 7 days a week for myself.
Yes, I've seen you on my Smoothie King runs often at the Grand Prairie location, so I can attest to that. So Scott and Ken, I'll ask you both too. Scott, what is the hands-on, the operations requirements for a franchisee for Mr. Gaddy's?
We probably follow pretty close in line to what Smoothie King does. We do not require that the primary owner work in the restaurant daily. However, we do ask that they identify an operating principal, and this can be a minority ownership position, but somebody that's going to spend their full-time job being in the restaurant. A good percentage of the Mr. Gaddy's franchisees are multi-unit operators, and so very few of them have day jobs doing something else. They are working on their business, although not necessarily in it, every day in every location. And then I have a fair share of individuals that they own one restaurant and they've owned it for 40 years. And that one facility has provided for them and their families for decades. Chick-fil-A is a perfect example. Their operators are required to be in the restaurant. And the way I interpret that agreement, it kind of looks more like a contract employee, but there's a reason those volumes are what they are. Chick-fil-A is one of the highest volume restaurant concepts in America. And it really is that ownership mentality working in their day to day. And our volumes at Mr. Gaddy's Pizzas are rapidly approaching that of Chick-fil-A. And so it helps to have someone with a vested interest in the business participating in the active operation of it.
Ken?
Sure. So I would say all of our owners are involved in actively managing the business on a day-to-day operations. This tends to be a passion play for them where they want to be in the business. They want to be serving wine, talking about wine. One of the prerequisites that we look for people who are going to join our franchises, are they people? Do they enjoy being around people and interacting with the public and teaching them about wine, as well as teaching their staff all the time too. So it's possible to run it with a general manager model, but that's not normal within our system. Everybody is pretty much an owner operator within it.
Now, Sarah, with that question at hand, every franchise is different. So outside of if you're required to operate and run the business, what are some other considerations when franchising that may be different from franchise to franchise that you would tell someone, make sure you consider this?
Well, I would say a big one right now is employees and what type of employees you might want to have, because some of these brands like Smoothie King and probably Sweet and Sassy, and I would think Mr. Gaddy's are probably going to be, Mr. Gaddy's is going to have a lot more employees than a Smoothie King, right? So how many employees do you want? What type of employees? Because I would suspect that some of these, you're going to be managing teenagers. Are you comfortable with that? Do you find that as your skill set, or are you more comfortable potentially managing a different type of employee, maybe fewer employees? I think another thing, these businesses that we're looking at are going to be open 7 days a week, some of them, and so how do you feel about that? We talk about that with folks too, like what kind of hours do you want? There are franchises. I know you mentioned Rod joining us. Hopefully he can, Roderick, with CMIT. That's an IT outsource franchise. That's business to business. It's going to be few employees, and it's mostly Monday through Friday unless there's an emergency. So I think those are a lot of the types of, I know those are a lot of the types of questions we get people thinking about that maybe they hadn't evaluated before looking into a business, is really how much do they want to be, how many people do they want to be managing, and what kind of hours do they want to put in, and what type of employees are they looking for?
Perfect. So with the support from franchisors to a franchisee, I know that if you are a brick and mortar franchise, you have to find a location, and that may look different. Some franchises have real estate departments, some do not. So I'll ask Ms. Thomas, what did that look like with Sweet and Sassy? Were you responsible for finding your location? Was there real estate support? What did that look like? Because I want people to understand that if you do a brick and mortar franchisee, what that can look like as far as your responsibility.
Great question. While the company provides support with the realtor, you're responsible for your own location. So you can essentially go anywhere you want, but they will guide you and let you know whether that's a good location or a bad location for the business based on research. And so, but to answer the question, you choose your own location.
And just Ken and Scott, in short, do you all provide real estate support, or are the franchisee responsible for the broker and finding their location?
Well, at Mr. Gaddy's, we make introductions to brokers that we've got relationships with, and of course, we coach on what we think is the right location. We also leverage some very sophisticated real estate analytics software that helps us pinpoint demographics of individuals that look like customers of our other locations. But as with Sweet and Sassy, the final decision ultimately is yours. It's your business. We hope that you're an expert in this market. And so we're here to help provide you with data, not tell you where to go.
Gotcha. Ken?
And to answer that question, Kay, yeah, we provide full support. We have a nationwide network of brokers that we oversee. We have the similar to what Scott talked about. We have very sophisticated real estate analysis tools that use cell phone data, metadata from people to see where they're coming from, what neighborhoods they're coming from, to go to a particular commercial address and make a determination if that neighborhood is matching up to who we know is going to our other wineries across the country. So we've got a pretty good track record. At the end of the day, I would say it's 51-49 where we decide the location. The franchisee gets certainly an input of the neighborhoods that they believe would do well, but we know what it will take to be successful. And we've made the mistake in the past of allowing a franchisee to have the 51% vote, and those do not work out as well as the ones where we say this is the spot in the decision cycle.
Great. So we can add that to the list, Sarah, of things. So attendees, if you're looking for a franchise, look into what your real estate responsibility would be as well. We have a great question in the chat in regards to funding. So to everyone in attendance, the attendees, last week on Thursday, we had Funding Your Franchise. So if you have an opportunity, take a look at that recording at gptx.org/small-biz. We had Cadence Bank on, and they provided some great information about funding. But Corey, one of the things we talked about on that Funding Your Franchise was ROBS, and I can never remember what the S is for, but it's using 401k to fund your small business and avoiding the tax penalties to fund. And I know in our conversations, you did that for when you're franchising. So can you speak to that way of funding your franchise?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So to kind of give you a little context of my background before I went out and did my own entrepreneur thing, I worked for 14, almost 15 years in financial services. So I worked with Fidelity Investments, one of the biggest financial firms out there. And through that process, since kind of they're known for 401k plans and help people save for retirement, I was able to save up a decent amount of money for retirement at that point in time. So when I started out on my venture of trying to obtain funding for my location, a lot of it was like, you don't have the experience, so we don't feel comfortable giving you the money. Even though credit wasn't too bad and I had some savings, it was more or less, they kind of paused on the fact like, well, you've never done this before. We don't know if you feel comfortable moving forward with the process. So trying to continue to dig, trying to make more phone calls, doing a lot more research. I did come across that the self-directed IRA process, which is essentially using your retirement funds, converting that to a business account, and then using the business account to fund your business going forward. So I said it in one sentence, it sounds very easy. There is very specific steps you got to take, very specific type of forms you need to complete. It's very limited on what you can do with that money, right? You can't just take that money and say, well, I changed my mind, I'm go buy a house instead or go buy a Ferrari instead. You got to be very specific on doing that. And there's companies out there that will help you through the entire process, like it did me, like sending you the forms, making sure you have everything documented the right way, helping you create the account if you want to. So there are companies, many more companies now than when I started it, that can certainly help you out with that process. So once the funds were converted from a retirement account to a business account, then I was able to use essentially kind of my own funds to fund the business going forward and get started that way.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you. And again, those are he used the RA, but that is the ROBS way of funding your business. And that was I did not even know about that until last week's session. And so you also can look into the SBA 7A loan, which is very favorable to franchising if you find a bank that partners with the SBA. So a great way to fund. Rod has joined us. As mentioned, Rod is a unconventional path to franchise. To those of you who think about franchising, he is a franchise in IT. So I wanted Rod to speak briefly about how he chose to do a franchise in technology.
Yes, thank you, Kate. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you so much I'm sorry I'm late. I'm walking out another meeting, so I apologize for the tardiness. Thank you for the question. Yes, my genesis dates back 20 years with regards to IT. I recently just semi-retired, I guess, if you want to call it that, from Verizon after in 2021, and I started my business, which is CMIT Solutions of Arlington, in 2021. I chose the path of franchises because to the point, I also did a Rob's rollover and funded my business as well. And so I did that because I felt that obviously IT is my bailiwick, and that's where I'm comfortable. However, I was not privy to a lot of business knowledge prior to my leaving Verizon. I was in the echo chamber at Verizon for some time. And of course, when you have those type of resources, you may not have the business acumen that you need, but of course you can throw a lot of money at things and fix problems. Whereas with owning a franchise, you kind of have to be the end all be all and wear several hats in your environment. And I felt that for me, franchising was a better opportunity because there's already a proven track record with success. And then also there is a wealth of knowledge that's at your disposal that can help you navigate some challenging times in franchising. Right. So one of the reasons that I chose CMIT was because of the ownership commitment for each of the owners to help other owners be successful. And of course, fostering that environment of success is what really, made the big difference for me. I feel that that was a great trade-off instead of trying to start it for myself and go through the ups and downs and the challenges. And of course, then, possibly, leading myself more down a road of failure than had taken the road where there is, like I said, processes and protocols that have already been put in place to aid in your success. So for me, franchising was a much better choice than trying to start it from the ground up. Again, I know the technology very well, but I will be honest, I was green as a blade of grass when it had come to starting a business and running a business. So therefore, if I had some protocols and processes in place that I could follow, I felt that the transition would be a little bit easier. It's still a challenge, but yet you still have some kind of a blueprint to help you through those times where if not having those, it have been probably devastating and even catastrophic. So that's my answer, Kate. Thank you for the question, and that's why I chose franchise.
Awesome. So we have a question in the Q&A chat to the franchisees. Considering your experience in franchising, what do you wish a program like Franchise U would have told you to allow you to do something differently today? And we'll start with you, Ms. Thomas.
Well, I wish that I had the Franchise U before I even considered the franchise, just to get a wealth of knowledge and to see the big picture of the expectations of how to navigate, and it would make everything so much simpler. To echo on what what Rod said, just walking into a franchise and not just having that business knowledge, then I think that would be that great introduction.
Is there anything that you would do differently on your franchise path?
Not right now. I mean, it's exciting right now. I'm enjoying it. I love the ride.
Great. Corey, what about you? What if somebody said, if anything that you wish someone would have told you before you jumped into the franchise pool, what would that have been?
Well, I'll try to answer the question this way. I would say, I mean, the success of your business is going to be the people that work for you ultimately, right? So you certainly want to hire the best, most qualified people as you can. You know, I guess also the smart thing to think about that is, you know, even though there's a franchise concept there, which provides the playbook on how to do your business, that doesn't mean it's as simple as plug and play and just drop somebody in there because there's a playbook that exists. It still has to be the right person with the right work ethic, the right character, and actually somebody who's dependable, basically. What nobody told me is right now I don't have any children, therefore no kids in this generation. But nobody told me this generation of kids or employees that are much younger than us is different than the generation I grew up. So it's just different ways of having conversations, different ways of approaching things with them, and just setting different expectations with them versus the way I was raised and also the generation before me.
I agree, 1000%. And Ms. Thomas has a 16-year-old, so I'm sure she can attest about the generations as well. Scott, now this may be different from franchise to franchise, but what does cost? Let's talk cost. What does I want to franchise with Mr. Gaddy's? These are the costs I need to consider, from franchise fee to building. What does that look like around cost?
Absolutely. Well, as most of you know, Gaddy's is a 50-plus-year-old brand, and depending upon what part of the country or even what part of Texas you may have grown up in, it may mean something different to you. So today we operate two different formats. One is a family entertainment center, and a family entertainment center is roughly about 12,000 square feet. Can be in a strip shopping center or could be in a freestanding structure. I'm going to kind of reference the idea of you're going into a strip shopping center. There is a structure there, and we are converting that into a Mr. Gaddy's Pizza. So the range that we have in our franchise disclosure document, and I'm sure y'all talked about the FDD and parts of it, the item 7 of my franchise disclosure document for family entertainment center list roughly $2 million to $3.5 million for one of the 12,000 square foot family entertainment centers. And of course, that's inclusive of initial franchise fees. That's inclusive of training and deposits and everything you can think of, and even some working capital kind of lumped into that range. One thing to think about is one person didn't spend $2 million, somebody else spent 3.5. That is the total line items, highs and lows that we saw over the previous year. And so the odds of you hitting the low on everything are probably equal to the odds of you hitting the high on everything, and you're probably going to split it right down the middle. One thing that we also don't take an account for is tenant improvement money. So those are dollars negotiated when you lease space, and the landlord is rebating you for improving his project. And we don't account for you going and buying dirt. But in our system, we're probably 50-50. Half the people own the dirt, they build the building, and then they put the Mr. Gaddy's inside their building, versus the ones that go and lease space somewhere in a strip shopping center or an old grocery store. The second format I have is a smaller delivery and carry out only unit. So this is probably closer in square footage to a Sweet and Sassy or a Smoothie King for that fact. We're about 12 to 1,500 square feet. And in those, the investment is much less. The range in those is roughly 400,000 to 600,000, with that same metrics holding true. And of course, these are much smaller footprints. You don't have all the FF&E. And so certainly an easier segue into franchising. A lot of people do a combination of the both. They own family entertainment centers and the smaller delivery and carry out only units.
I'm going to ask this of both Sarah, and then I'll come back to you, Scott, as well. Sarah, with your workings with franchisees and franchisors, what can you say that you've seen some key elements that a franchisee looks for in a franchisee?
Oh, yeah, great question. So we always tell our clients that really the franchisor wants to see transferable skills that equate to leadership, good communication, maybe operations and management experience, because those are the things that they can't teach. Some franchisors, I saw on one of the questions, about, are you a member of the Chamber of Commerce and things like that? Some franchisors require more of that type of thing, like something like a CMIT, for example, that Rod is doing, that's business to business, versus something that might be business to consumer, like the Mr. Gaddy's or Sweet and Sassy or, Smoothie King, that might be more dependent on social media and direct mail and some of those things. So a lot of it's going to depend on the brand and what skill set they want that would be transferable. So some of them might need more marketing skill set, more sales skill set. But in general, I mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, some of you that own the restaurant industries, but a lot of times restaurants, so I've been told, do want you to have some experience in that industry. But most of the other brands really don't expect or want you to have experience in the industry, but want you to have those other skills that they can't teach, and then they can teach you the industry. Most of the time you'll find that people buying a franchise, Rod mentioned he had an IT background. Rod's a little bit of a unique, because he also, this is going to sound bad, but a lot of people that are technical and kind of have an IT background have been sitting behind a computer all the time. Rod's nodding. He knows what I'm going to say. But a lot of times for an IT franchise, they want you to be able to get out and be involved in your community and promote your business and not be the technician. And sometimes those two things don't always align. Somebody with IT expertise may not have the business development expertise also.
So Scott, what does Mr. Gay look
I
for?
would.
Oh, go ahead, Rod. Go ahead, Rod. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, Scott, what to talk briefly, what does Mr. Gaddy's look for? And, and then Corey, with you having, a Smoothie King, La Madeline's, and Buttermilk Sky Pie, was there a requirement for you to have that background? So I'll ask both of you out, those questions in that order.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah hit the nail on the head. We are looking for individuals that have the ability to manage people. And the people that are the best at identifying, recruiting, training, motivating, and maintaining frontline employees generally are the most successful people in our industry. And so it truly is that skill that we're looking for. I can teach a 16-year-old how to make pizza. So I don't need a career restaurateur. I don't need a chef. I just need someone that knows how to recruit staff and interact with guests and enjoy doing that. That's not something that pains them to do. It's something that they derive pleasure from developing people and interacting with the public. And so, a lot of our individuals or other business owners, I've got a lot of franchisees that are franchisees of other concepts, most of them food related, non-competition. And so that's what we generally are attracted to us. And of course, I also get the people like ourselves that grew up with Gaddy's, that grew up as fans of the brand and just want to relive their childhood by owning one of them. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Corey, were you required to have any background or experience in franchising any of the 3 franchises that you have?
Not specifically going into Smoothie King or Buttermilk. It wasn't anything that was like an interview process or anything deliberate. They stated in their prior paperwork that you've got to have these skill sets. La Madeline doesn't have very many franchisees in their system, so it may be more of a kind of an unsaid expectations that they're looking for certain people to probably come in and be a franchisee with them going forward. So again, while specifically not stated in anything in writing, they have their franchise coordinator who I met with prior to becoming a franchisee. I mean, we had several conversations and want to know all about my background. And La Madeline happens to be headquartered here in Dallas, and he stopped by both of my stores here locally when he was in town just to first speak with me, but also, kind of mystery shop, so to speak, staff, just to see, how the stores are run basically. And but from the concepts I have, not in writing, but certainly everything that Scott said is certainly important. It's all about the people aspect, the ability to recruit, motivate, maintain a good staff, right? Because potentially a lot of these food concepts could be high turnover, but the way you're able to limit that turnover leads to the success of your location going forward as well. And that comes from somebody who has that great people management skill set that can help keep their staff in place for a long period of time.
Great, great. Now I have a question, and I think that there's a question, it was in the Q&A in the chat, but I want to know as well. Realistically speaking, you invest this money into a franchise. How long does it take before you actually start profiting on your franchise, right? Not to get into your specifics to know what you're making as a franchisee, but what is the potential for, you know, an annual profit as a franchisee, and how long does it take for you to make a profit? And I'll start with you, Rod, because you're in IT, and it looks different because you're B2B, and then I'll go over to Corey since he's the other operating franchise.
So for me, I'm still in the analysis phase of that, being as though I've only been in business for about 1.5 years. But when I did my pro forma, I think that I would be cash flow positive coming up at the end of this year. So maybe about 2 years is where I expect to be in the black. I'm following that protocol and that process very closely, and of course, you know, planning every day for that. It's going to be different because, again, to Sarah's point, yeah, I am more B2B. You know, a lot of my work is going to come from referral based, you know, endeavors such as BNI, you know, chambers of commerce, different, you know, just, you know, different folks that you've met in the different sectors of business. But for me, in regards to being profitable, I think that I'm a little bit ahead of the curve. So I don't want to make a statement that say that this is going to be the de facto, but I'd say at least 2 years, 3 years before you will become cash flow positive and start receiving some kind of a revenue and getting your business black again. But it's gonna vary, of course, from your industry, your vertical, and obviously, you know, the way that your business grows, your territory, so on and so forth. So again, I don't want to make a blanket statement to say everybody's going to be cash flow positive within a couple of years. Yeah. But that's where I targeted when I started my business, that in 2 years I'd like to be somewhat cash flow positive. I'm on track to do that.
So a question came in and said, well, how do you recommend supplementing your income prior to becoming profitable as a franchisee?
For me specifically?
Yes.
So that's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out as well. So I think to everybody's point, I also had, as doing a Rob's rollover, I had made a pretty good amount of money in my days at Verizon. So I budgeted myself, and of course I had to lean my expenditures out quite a bit with regards to my personal living environment. I have not taken on a second supplementation or a second job, or if you will, or any kind of a gig job at this point. I'm basically, you know, kind of relying on the severance that I took from Verizon, and of course, in some other investments that I've made that have proven lucrative. I've been kind of, you know, surviving on that right now while I build my business. And again, just making sure that you understand what your living, you know, expenses are, what they really are, and as opposed to what you would like for them to be. I realize now that I've always lived very frugal. I've never really lived above my means in any way, even when I was making, you know, really good money at Verizon. I stayed within my means. So my lifestyle didn't really change much. So I don't know if I'd be the proper candidate to speak on that. Again, I just budgeted very well and just tried to live within my means. And so I have not had, at least up to this point, haven't had a need to take on a supplement, you know, any kind of supplementation efforts to maintain my lifestyle. So that's just my personal opinion.
All right, Corey, over to you, because you are function operating. We'll use the Smoothie King because you're upcoming for La Madeleine's, and your Buttermilk Sky Pie is going to open. So for Smoothie King, how long, you know, realistically can a franchisee expect to wait before they start? I think Rod used the word cash flow positive, and any recommendations on supplementing prior to becoming profitable?
Yeah, kind of like Rod. Like I said, it's not an exact science because it will vary. All right, because I speak to tons of other Smoothie King franchisees across the country. Some come in from day one profitable. Some can take up to 2, maybe 3, 4 years potentially on how to become profitable. Right. So you know, since I did, you know, some of it is also what the what you put on paper and send to the IRS on how you look profitable versus how you don't look profitable. So kind of in my case, it took me, a year or so with the first location to be profitable, particularly since I'm using my own funds to fund the business, right? I didn't borrow a lot of money going into it, so I didn't have a lot of money to pay back to people, if you think about it that way. If you want to think about it long term, it's almost year 5 of me having the location. I've probably by now recouped all that money that I've put in from the RBO process that I used to open up the location. But a different location like DeSoto, for example, it took us years to finally get that location open. But if you look at it on paper, it didn't take very long for that particular location to turn around and be profitable because we timed it pretty right at the beginning of the year, went right into the summer, and it's been doing pretty well for us ever since. So some of the tricks on being, I don't say tricks, but people are probably defining profitability in different ways. Like, meaning, are you able to pay your bills every day versus what are you sending to the IRS showing, as a profit or loss, right? I'm not trying to be a tax advisor, but there's a lot of things you write off at the beginning whenever you are starting your business, and you should certainly take advantage of that because you can't do that later on in your business to show that, I'm making money, but it's not profitable from the standpoint because I gotta pay off all these people that I owe money to. Prior to me opening, right, kind of like Rod, I was very frugal because all my cars were paid off. I had several credit cards as backup, so should I get in a crunch or anything, I had those to kind of swipe if I needed to swipe anything. But on this Smoothie King, most of the time lunch was at Smoothie King, or I was there open to close most days. So I didn't have a lot of expenses at home, ate the bare minimum, and it's kind of grinded it out the first several months as I opened up the location. So I would recommend anybody, prior to opening their location, clear your plate, try to clear the debt off as much as possible. Try to, pay off any big bills that you have, but of course have some personal savings in place as well, because you never know how long it's going to take. Even though there's different avenues out there to help you be successful, particularly from a franchising standpoint, because like Sarah and Scott said, there's Smoothie King does the same thing. They did their research, got analytics to show where they feel like their location will have success. But they're also clear to tell you there is no silver bullet that says just because we did our analytics and said this is where your Smoothie King should go and have success, that it's always going to turn out to be that way. So always make sure that you've taken care of yourself from a personal standpoint on having, backup plans and maybe even a part-time job, but certainly having somebody in your corner that can support you financially should it take you longer to reach the profitability standpoint.
Great answer. Thank you, Corey, for that. Rod, I know that you are actually a client of FriendNet. You utilize their matchmaking services. So how helpful was using a organization like FriendNet in your franchise journey? How helpful was that?
So I'm going to graciously give all of the roses to my good friend, Sarah Wasco, who I've known for several years. She was instrumental. She is instrumental in my journey and where I've come from and where I've gone. She's been very patient with me as I've gone through several franchises and starting the process and stopping the process and starting the process again. And she's been, just a godsend to me. So for me, having FranNet and Fran Fund available for those resources was pivotal for me making the decision. I told Sarah this when I signed that I could not have done it without them. And because they walk you through the process, they really hold your hands through everything that makes sure you're well informed. And I'm saying from Sarah all the way down to closing and to getting funding, their organization has been second to none for me. And again, I probably would not have done it had I not had Sarah Wasco in my corner. So for me, it's been instrumental. Anyone looking to go that route, I would say franchise consulting is definitely the way to go. Because again, I was not an expert, in running a business or even knowing how to even find a profitable business. I was an expert in IT, so I just felt that I stayed in my wheelhouse and followed that path. And again, with understanding the ins and outs, of course, all of the different vehicles of getting a franchise off the ground, understanding how to start your corporation, funding your corporation, so on and so forth. Yeah, so using a franchise consultant like Fran at Sarah Wasco was definitely pivotal for me and instrumental in my journey. So, and I appreciate them thoroughly for what they've done for me. So I would recommend anyone looking in that area to definitely look for franchise consulting to help them on that journey. It would definitely be well worth the cost and well worth the amount of time that you'll save in starting your business.
I appreciate you, Rod.
You as well, Sarah.
You're
Thank you.
very kind.
Sarah, I think you found your ambassador.
Well, we did work together for a while. I mean, we worked together, and then he ended up getting a job, and the timing just wasn't right. And we did look at several brands. Lucretia's nodding her head. There is a timing factor, and so sometimes things work out as they should. He I think needed to go, and I don't want to speak for you, Rod, but just from our experience, I think he needed to go back to his job to really validate that he was ready to leave corporate America and do his own thing. And so it's a huge decision. And we're not ever trying to convince or persuade anybody, as any of you sitting here can attest. It's a lot of hard work. Lucretia's situation was a little different. I mean, she found a business that she knew 10 years ago that she wanted to own, and then it just became a timing factor for her to make it work out. And sometimes, that happens to be the case as well. I think she understood the business well enough going in to know if it was a fit or not, but that's not the case for everybody.
Perfect. Well, we are nearing the end of our time, and I'm going to go around and ask high-level 1-minute closure from the franchisees. Any last-minute advice you will give to those that are tuning in? This is also recorded, so those who will watch later. Any advice to them, and then also from the franchisor side, and then I'll end, Sarah, with you. So I'll start first with Ms. Thomas. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. So it doesn't take a minute. Do your research, do lots of research, take your time, and enjoy the process. I mean, it's difficult, it's challenging. There are good days, bad days, heartaches, smiles, but just whenever you decide to do it, just give it 100%.
Corey?
Yes, a lot of the same things, but I would say I think what prevents a lot of people from franchising or getting started in a business is the initial hurdles that you encounter whenever you first get started with the process, mostly from a funding standpoint, mostly what's the right fit standpoint. But I would say that there's tons of resources out there, continue to dig, but also a lot of resources out there from a funding standpoint or ways to help get your business started that you may not realize that it's available to you. So kind of like me when I got started, a lot of people are going to tell you no, but just keep on swinging, and you'll eventually get that hit that you'll need.
Great. Rod?
I'll take a different perspective. Thank you for the question, Kate. So one of the things that I learned, especially in the IT area, because we are more service-based, is that I learned to, and I'll offer the advice of working on your business as opposed to working in your business. Being technical, I tend to kind of get into the weeds and I forget about actually building the business and being a CEO and the owner of my business. So I would recommend that those who get into like maybe more of a service-based industry like I'm in, more to B2B, work on your business instead of in your business. It will pay for itself. If you can, hire those who are technical, that can come in and can take care of a lot of the things that you normally would do. But you have to, elevate yourself to ownership status where, I used to be a tech and an engineer. I think that was a huge bit of advice that I've taken that I would offer to someone else. Work on your business instead of in your business. I think that would prove lucrative and valuable to you as you go.
Great advice. Scott?
Well, I will say, and I think all of our franchisees here represent that, is first and foremost, they were passionate about the brand and the business that they wanted to be in. And so if it doesn't excite you, don't do it. Second, I would say also don't be afraid of partnerships. If funding is the hurdle, there are plenty of people out there that would love to invest in something, but do not want to get their hands dirty. And so joint venturing with people is very common in our industry. And so if that's your hurdle, is the cash to get involved, find somebody with some cash and joint venture with them, but starting with something you can be passionate about.
Great, thank you. And Sarah, I will end with you before I have my closing statement.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to tag along what Scott said, and I'm just going to say, if you do go into a partnership, I can't stress enough the value of having a partnership agreement written up so that all the what ifs, attorneys think of all of those things. And so that's all outlined in advance, and there's no difficulties when something might change within your relationship or agreement. And the other thing I would just tell you is, and quite a few others have addressed it, is just don't make an emotional decision. Make sure that you are doing your due diligence, doing your research, and you're making a business decision. You're making a decision about a business that'll help you meet your goals, financial, personal, lifestyle. Maybe you want to be able to bring jobs to your community. For a lot of people, it's not all about the business. It's what are you seeking to accomplish from the business? Will this business help you accomplish those goals? Don't buy a business just because you happen to love smoothies, so you want to own a Smoothie King. Really understand what your role of the owner is, what you're doing to work on the business, who your employees are going to be, and then go from there. And if you love smoothies and then it checks all those other boxes, great. But if you just love smoothies and really don't have a clue about what's involved, then do your due diligence and make sure that it all aligns before you move forward.
Great. Thank you all for that. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today and providing your expertise and experience to those that are interested in the franchising path of entrepreneurship. To all those that are in attendance, I have placed our jot form in the chat for you to take a survey on today's sessions. This will help us in growing our Entrepreneur U program. You will also receive it via email. I will also say that we have previous sessions recorded and placed on our small biz site, and it speaks to what Scott and Sarah, the joint ventures. We had a legal session that talks about the joint ventures, and on our website, Hush Blackwell actually offers free pro bono services to small business owners if you qualify, and they will assist you with your joint venture contracts, etc. We have a video on funding your franchise and funding your business. So it's not just this session here. For everything we talked about, that we have a previous session in our previous month's recordings on how you can get started and support your business. So thank you all for joining us. Sarah's information is in the chat as well, and I will send that to you all via email as well. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Franchise U session. I enjoyed everything, and it was been great meeting you all. And I look forward, Scott, I look forward to seeing you and meeting you in person, and hopefully bringing a grandparent.
Yes, ma'am.
Daddy's the grandparent. Thank you all.
Thank you all.